Of you in this APM class. In this particular class, we are going to cover F5 APM module. So hopefully you are already aware about F5 LTM. If you are not, then that's fine. If you have basic understanding of load balancer, we would be able to cover the APM with that knowledge only. So let me just bring the slide and introduce you about F5 APM module. So if I talk about F5 APM module, so basically this module is used to manage the access policy, right? So if I talk about what is access policy, so whenever you are trying to access any resource, right? On that resource, you can configure some restriction that only authenticated and authorized user would be able to access the resources. So maybe in your organization, you have a different type of resources. When I talk about resources, you might be hardware devices, you might be software devices, you have some portal, you have some application, or you have some restricted area into the network for which you just want to configure the policy that whenever user is trying to access those resources, it should be on authenticated authorized manner. For that, you can use access policy manager. So I would take simple example for access policy manager. And I would let you know that what are the other vendor is offering with regarding to access policy manager. So let's say you are at home and you just want to access company resources. How you are accessing nowadays, you are using a VPN through which you connect securely and you access company resources from your own. When you are using a VPN, it is providing you authentication and authorization and accounting. Okay, because if you are not authenticated, you can't access. You can't connect to the VPN. So once you authenticate, it is going to assign some policy to you so that you can access a particular resource. With F5 APM, you can do that. Okay. Not only you can do this remote access with F5 APM, but also you can enforce a policy. So in nutshell, if we say that what is APM, so you can say this is a remote access solution with policy enforcement, right? So it is providing you remote access using SSL VPN. It is providing remote access using portal access. It is providing you remote access for your application using app tunnel, right? Where it would be a single application would include your remote desktop access. The APM also providing you policy enforcement point where it would help you to authenticate and authorize a user. It would do endpoint inspection, like whenever user is connecting to your office resources, before connecting to the office resources, before permitting the access, it it scan the user security posture, whether it's antivirus updated, Windows updated or not. All those security posture it is going to check. So using the endpoint inspection feature, APM would help you to inspect the endpoint security health, endpoint health, and based on that, it is going to permit that endpoint to access the resource or not. Right? So before talking about too much theoretical, let's go with this slide. As I mentioned, that big IP APM provide granular access controls to discrete application and network supporting. Network and application, and it is supporting two-factor authentication, and also it is providing federated identity management. That means using APM, you can use two-factor authentication, or in the APM, you can use federated identity uh, management, which is SSO. F5 APM is providing multiple services, which would help you to protect and manage the access of your applications. APM you can deploy on hardware. Okay, so you can purchase big IP appliance. You can enable there. If you have a cloud or you have virtual appliances, there also you can enable APM modules. These are the feature offered by the APM. With the APM, you can do the SSO. It can act as a client SSL or web-based SSL VPN access. It can help you to, it can work as a web portal access to the application. It can act as a desktop application and VDI support. It can help you to access policy deployment and manage the solution. And it can act as a secure web gateway for the proxy services. So important thing is, when you understand that in the market we have a multiple VPN vendor, why we should use a APM there? If you have multiple VPN vendor, like you can deploy a VPN on the firewall as well, and there are dedicated VPN appliances like Pulse device, where you can use as a VPN concentrator or VPN connection point. Why we should go for APM? The VPN point might be offering two type of VPN. One is the um, remote access or web-based VPN. Okay, so remote access, where you would have you have to deploy a client software, or maybe you can use a web-based VPN. With the F5 APM, you can have a more granular control where you can apply the VPN access up to application level. So for example, you just want to publish single application to your users, and that application could be um, Outlook, right? User would be able to access their email securely. So what you can do, a single application you can publish for the user on the web portal. Once user authenticated, he or she should be able to access their application, whatever you publish for a particular user. We will see that during the class itself. Moving to next, we are going to talk here about course content. So what we are covering? We are covering here to set up a big IP system, where we would understand that how you can set up your F5 devices. Then we would configure web application access. Then we would explore about access policy. Then we would talk about big IP APM. Here we would talk about what are the important file into the APM. Like you know that where the logs of the LTM is stored. Similarly, we are going to talk about important file, logs file, configuration file of APM. We would talk about authentication in the next part, and then we would talk about the portal access. So using big IP APM, you can configure the access portal for the user, right? So we would talk about that, how you can configure the portal access, how you can configure network access, how you configure what all the things would be checked on the client side whenever client is connecting to your network resources. Okay, Then we would talk about authorization. We would talk about the access control list, how you can restrict some certain area using access control list. We would talk about SSO, and after talk about I rules. Okay, so here we will talk about I rules with regard to APM. Okay, then we are going to talk about how you can customize APM as per your organization requirement. Okay, so we will take some scenario over here and we will talk about the APM configuration. Then we would discuss about web talks. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, so let discuss here. So after that, we would talk about here about web tops and wizards. Okay, now you can customize the web tops for a particular user, and then we would talk about big IP edge client using which you would be connecting through the VPN using APM module. This is the course content. Now I would talk about F5 architecture. So you know that F5 you can deploy on the hardware or you can deploy on the virtual edition. You could have a two type of deployment platform. You can deploy on the hardware platform or you can deploy on the virtual edition, right? On the hypervisor you can deploy. On the top of that, there is a TMOS operating system, traffic manager operating system. This is the operating system of your F5. And on the top of it, you are going to deploy or going to enable a particular module, maybe LTM, DNS, LC. Similarly, you are going to deploy APM module. So APM modules come under security category. However, LTM, DNS, LC is coming under the availability category. So here we are going to talk about security category module, which is APM. There we can control app access and SSL VPN. Now, if I talk about F5, so F5, you know that it can work as a full proxy where user could request for three-way handshakes on the behalf of user. F5 could do the three-way handshake to backend server. User could send some application data. F5 can modify those application data and send to the backend server. User send the traffic between F5 to the user. The traffic would be encrypted. However, on the backend, maybe traffic is unencrypted. So F5 is going to help the user to send the secure traffic up to F5 on the backend. Maybe traffic is unencrypted. User may send compressed traffic, okay, but on the backend it would be uncompressed. Maybe on the backend, you are using, low level protocol, low version of protocol like HTTP 1.1 you are using, but here you can use HTTP 1.2 or HTTP 1.3. So F5 completely can work on the as a full proxy where it could send the where it could proxify the session on the behalf of user. If I talk about F5 deployment, so you know that LTM is deployed in a one arm mode, two arm mode, or multi arm mode. So in one arm mode, you have a single interface through which it would be sending request and receiving the request and sending the response both. We would have an inline mode or routed mode where we can say that F5 have two interface. One interface is working as a front end and other interface is working as a back end. So in this way, you can see this interface working as a front end and this interface is working as a back end. If you know that in F5 big IP, we have a different component. We have the interfaces for management, for to deploy the configuration, etc. We have USB interface. There is a console interfaces using which you can take the console of this box. And then we have Ethernet port. Basically, these interfaces going to participate on the data plane. And then we have LCD panel, and then we have a LCD panel control buttons. Now, I would talk about lab. So this is APM lab. In this lab, we have, as of now, I kept single APM device. So we can add more, right? And in this lab, you can see we have the server. which would be used as a backend. And we have a client. This client would be accessing the things from the front end. And we have the management port on the APM. Through this management port, we would be doing the configuration of my big IP APM devices. So I have, wipe out this particular lab. And now I'm going to configure this lab for you. So in this class, what we are going to learn, like if we have web server, we have 3 web server or 4 web server as of now, right? So we have web server 1. This is my web server. This is also web server. This is also web server. This is also web server. So if I say all these are the web server, and all together this is making a pool, and this pool is running on port number 80. All these server is website is running on a port number 80. This user, this is a user who is hitting the web server, virtual server over here. And then F5 sending that request to the backend nodes. And these backend node is providing web page for this user. As of now, when these user accessing the web page, they are not asked for the authentication. Okay. User would be directly would be able to access these web server. When we deploy APM over here, on the APM, we would control APM. Today's we are going to learn access policy. We would create access policy here. Access policy. Using this access policy, what we would do, we would enforce the user who is trying to access this virtual server. First, they need to authenticate, and once they are authenticated, then they can access these web server, else not. Right, so that is my purpose for today's class. So let's go and let's access this. So what I would try to do, I would configure gig 0/0 as an internal VLAN. This would be part of my internal VLAN. And for this internal VLAN, I would take this IP 192.168.2. Let's say 1 I would take. And gig 0/1 I would use as an external VLAN. And for external VLAN, I would take 172.16.0.1/24. And this user would have IP 172.16.0.10/24. Then we have a management interface. For management interface, I'm going to take this IP 10.10.0.0.1/24. And this would be the host which is used as a management interface. Management host. This is a management host through which I would access this F5 device for GUI access. So on this host, I would configure 10.0.0.10 IP/24. This is connecting to the internet. So this would be helpful when we are going to activate F5 device. Okay, any questions so far? Later in our lab, what we would do, this I would use as a AD server, but not in today class, but later we are going to configure AD server, Active Directory server. Okay, and using this AD server, as of now, I would create a local user over here, but later we would create a user over here so that whenever user is trying to authenticate, instead of using local database of big IP APM, it should use AD server for the authentication. Any questions so far? Anyone?
Can you hear me? Yes, I have
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah.
It's Jeff. It's James. James. Will you see the single sign-on in the future, right?
Yeah. You will see
SSL, nice.
single sign. Yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
nice. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's start. So I'm going to turn on this F5 device. Going to turn on all the necessary resources.
Hey guys,
Hi, Michael.
hi. Good
Oh,
good
hi,
afternoon
Michelle.
to you. Apologize to be late.
No problem. Thank you. So, Michael, what we are trying to do in this particular, maybe you are a little late, so let me just repeat. So, what we are going to do in this particular lab, we are going to configure F5 device as a APM so that whenever user would try to access a web server through F5, web server itself would ask for the authentication. Not web server, but F5 APM should ask for the authentication. Okay, so that's what I just want to do.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not able to. Are you sharing something?
yeah. You're not able
Yeah,
to
I
see?
can. No, no. Yeah, right now I'm able to see your screen.
Okay, let me turn on. Okay,
Thank you.
so yeah, great. So this is totally raw device as of now. This is totally new device, this big IP APM, and I'm trying to access it. I have a web server. These are my web servers. This is my Windows client, and this is okay. So I have turned on all those devices. Let me try to log in and see the IP address. Yeah, so this web server got 2.10 IP. What is the IP of this web server? Root, root. Ifconfig. Okay. So server 2 is not configured as a web server. And let me check server 3 root root. ifconfig. This is also not configured. Ifconfig. Okay. So I have just one server is configured as a web server. What I would do, I would add only one server as of now on big IP APM. So let access this big IP APM. It is still getting on. For resources which is not required as of now, I'm going to turn off. So this Windows server is not required. Only we require this client and this one. So basically we required a user, we required management PC, we required APM, and we required just web server. Meanwhile, this is getting on. Let me check lab resources. So system status. Okay, we have to wait until this big IP APM get started. Meanwhile, this big IP APM is being started. I can show you the configuration of web server. This is server one. And you can see the server in server one, we have an IP address 192.168.2.10. And if I show you whether this IP address has been configured in the Apache or not. So Apache, Apache in the Linux is a web server module. So let me show you the configuration of Apache. So if I show you configuration using nano command, nano space /etc Apache directory, and here apache.conf. So here you should be able to see that host name option, sorry, server name option, where you would see that in server name, we have configured same IP as it is on this particular server. And after this, I would show you the web server default file configuration, which is index.html file. So that file exists in the var directory. So I would go into that file using nano command, nano var www html and index.html. So this is a web server file, and in this file you would be able to see there we have configured some pages over here. So as of now, we have put this server name in the title one. This is server one. Okay, so when I would access the server, it is going to show me the content from this particular file. Let me exit from here. Control X. All right, let's see what is the condition of this big IP APM. This seems stuck so far. I have taken another machine. This is big IP only as of now. Let's see. Okay, so I would be using this one because there is some problem on this particular device. So I would be using this one. So I have configure management interface, and then yeah, I have configured the management interface. I have uh, taken gig 0/0, gig 0/1, and 0/2. So let's start the configuring of this big IP, and this big IP I would use as a APM device. So this is the big IP device. Let's log in as a default username password. Can you tell me what is the default username? Root, and password is a default. Current password default. And new password is test at 123. Test at 123. Root default. And the current password is default. New password test at 1234. Test at 1234. Okay, let me put netmin at the rate 123. Netmin at the rate 123. Okay, so password has been changed. Let's go to config mode. So that we can set up the IP address. Sorry. Config mode to set up the IP address. And the management IP I am putting 10.0.0.1. Net mask 255. And default route I would put 254. It's all fine. So I have configured the management IP using config setup utility. And now I would access this F5 device using GUI so that I could activate licenses, etc. So this is my host through which I would access this device. So I need to make sure that on this particular host, in either E2 or E1 interface, I should have one of the 10 series IP so that I could access this big IP device. So let's access this Windows device. And through this, first let me check what is the IP address configure on this system. ipconfig. Using this command, I can see IP address. So I need to make sure that one of the IP address of the interface should be 10 series IP, and I have. So from here, I would try to ping my F5 device, ping 10.0.1, and I'm able to ping, so that if I'm able to ping, can access my F5 device. So let me try to access that F5 device. So I have opened the browser, and now I would access my F5 device using HTTPS. I can access. I need to click on advanced, proceed, and I'm here. I can log in using default username password, admin. Let's try to log in. admin netmin at 123. Current password netmin at 123. New password, same password I'm putting. Yeah. 1234 I'm putting. Just a moment. Let me put some strong password over here. Username admin and new password. Let's log in. Okay, so I'm able to log in into the F5 device. As of now, you can see this device is not licensed, so I need to install the license on this. So let me install the license. Let's activate this, and before that, I need to make sure that this Windows device have internet access or not. So let me check. CMD ping google.com. It has internet access. So I would add the key over here. And the key I have, let me see what the key I have. The key I have, that is DGC FV dash IJRBE dash EKJYA dash EIYXQ dash XXI XRSF. This is the key I have. Let me copy this. And then I just want to activate manual. Let's go. DGCFV, DGCFV, IJ, IJRBE, EKJYA, PIYXQ, XXIXRSF. Fine. So this is the key I had, and now I would try to download this file. And now I would go to licensing server. I would upload Dozier over here. I hope you are already aware about this process, right? License activation.
I'm okay. I'm okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
good. So let me activate license first. This is the license file. I can download this, and then I would upload that license file over here, which I have received just now. And then I would click on next option. It is going to take a while to activate the license. And once it is going to activate the license, I would configure the interfaces, and the interfaces I would configure according our discussion, that on internal VLAN I would assign 2.1, and on external VLAN I would assign this IP. Let's see what is the status of activation. This is still activating. Okay, this has been activated. I need to select the resources. So LTM is required to use the APM. So I would use LTM on this, and now I would enable access policy manager APM module. For that, I would select this option, and this is going to provision as a nominal. And I would check over here, do we have enough memory? Yes, we have enough memory to activate that. Okay, so now I would go on next option, and this is going to reprovision the module over here. And after reprovisioning of module, I would try to go on the next part. So right now it is trying to reprovision the module. And once it would be reprovisioned, I should be able to see that my APM module is going to be enabled over here. So it takes 1 to 2 minutes.
Hamid, quick questions I have just pasted in the chat. So how we would know the current memory is sufficient for the new module, please? Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I
Sorry
think
guys,
Amir can't hear me. Yeah,
can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you. Are
Okay,
you
so
able to?
what was your question? I think I have missed it. There was some internet
No
glitch.
worry. Only I just wanted to know during the provisioning the new modules, is there indications on that page where we can see the required memory for this module is available before provisioning the modules, or
Yeah, there is an indication whenever you are trying to, you know, provision any module. For example, whatever the module you are trying to, right now it is showing that this is the APM module, and this is taking this much memory. I think it is 4 GB around. But whenever you are trying to enable any particular module, it would tell you, do you have enough space or not? So it is going to tell you that you don't have enough space right now for this particular one. So it is going to indicate that, yeah, you require this much space.
all right, thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah. So I would go on device certificate now because resource I have already provisioned. So this is the device certificate that would be used by your device when you are trying to access your device. This device certificate going to be used. That's fine. We don't want to renew this. This is self-signed certificate as of now. This is the your platform setup where you have a management IP, right? And if you want to change root password, you can change. I'm not going to change this. I would go to network part, and there I would try to configure the things. So in the first one, it is asking for redundancy. So if you have two devices, you can configure in HA. Right now, I would ignore that. Apart from that, I would configure VLANs and other stuff. So let's go here. This HA part I'm going to ignore as of now. And then I would click on next. Now it is asking self-sign IP for internal VLAN. So we had decided that for internal VLAN, we are going to assign this IP 2.1, subnet mask 255. And the first interface, this interface I'm going to use uh, as a part of my internal VLAN. So I'm going to associate 1.1, that first interface for this internal VLAN. Now I would click on next. And here I would take this IP, subnet mask, and default gateway I'm not going to assign. And second interface I would use as a part of external VLAN. And now I would click on finish. So once I would click on finish, after some time I would see that my LTM module has been installed. And if LTM module is installed, I would be able to see local traffic option. And if my APM module is installed, I would be able to see access option. So under access, we are going to configure everything regarding APM. And maybe when we are creating APM policy that we need to call into the virtual server. So we would associate APM policy on the virtual server, which we would create. Okay. So as of now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a virtual server, as I mentioned earlier. On this F5, I would create a virtual server, and maybe a virtual server IP I would assign 172.16.0.50, which is running on port number 80. And on the back end, we would have a pool. And this pool, as of now, I would add only one server, this web server. which is having IP 192.168.2.10, and this is running on port number 80. So whenever this user would hit the virtual server, let me change the color. Let's say this user would hit the virtual server. This virtual server would send the request to the backend node, which is web server 1. Without APM, that would be unauthenticated. User do not need to authenticate himself. But once we introduce the APM, user could only access the backend server post the authentication. So that is whole purpose of this particular lab. So let me just create a pool, and on that pool, I'm going to add a node. So let me just create a pool, and this pool, I would say, this is the, I need to create a new pool. Maybe I'm not able to see that option for new pool. Okay, so here is the create option. I can click here, and I can say this is the pool. I would say www pool. This is my pool name. On the back end, we would run HTTP, and that's why I have enabled HTTP monitor. And there I'm going to add some node. So node I'm going to add 192.168.2.10. This is backend node. And its address I'm going to add over here as well. The same IP, which is running on port number 80. Let's add this. I have just one node as of now. Later, if I just want to add more, I can add more as well. So this pool is up. That means my F5 is able to
Hello, Amar. Your voice break. Your voice stopped.
We can't hear you, Amir.
Sorry, guys, can you hear me now?
Yes, it is now clear.
Yes,
Loud
we
and
can
clear.
hear you.
Great, great. So let me just reshare a screen. I would repeat again what I have done. So I have created a pool. This is a pool. And in this pool, what I have done, I have added one node. If you go on the member, you would be able to see this. This is the node. This node is nothing but that is my backend server, this server. Okay. Now, what I just want that whenever user is accessing this virtual server, I mean, this pool using a virtual server, so it should authenticate. For that, I would create a virtual server. So I have a pool. I'm just going to create a virtual server. So I would give my virtual server name, create, give the virtual server name. For example, I would give vs_test. This is my virtual server name. vs_test. This virtual server running on a port number 80 as of now. So source user could come from anywhere, but my virtual server IP, I'm putting this 172.16.0.50. And this is, as of now, it is running on port number 80. And basic configuration HTTP profile, I'm not taking as of now. But here I would add AutoNet. Source address translation, that's auto map. And then default pool I'm selecting. This one is a default pool. Let's finish this. My virtual server is also up. And now I just want to test whether this is working fine or not. So from this Windows system, I would try to access my virtual server. I would try to hit my virtual server. So that Windows system is this one. And I need to make sure that this should be able to ping to the virtual server. Ping 172.16.0.50. And you can see I'm able to ping my virtual server. So if I'm able to ping, I could access that virtual server, the resource that is hosted on that virtual server. So I know that my website running on port number 80. So if I try to hit my virtual server using HTTP mechanism, and then IP address of my virtual server 172.16.0.50, I can access the website. This is a website that is hosted here. And I'm accessing this website using my LTM functionality, which is virtual server system. Now what I just want to authenticate a user while accessing this website. So I can do the authentication at two levels. Either I can go and configure authentication page on this server itself using some code, or I can enable the authentication on virtual server itself. So let's say there are some application which would require to change the authentication, which required authentication. And if you do the authentication, you need to change entire architecture of your application over here. So you don't want to make changes on the application level. However, you just want to push the authentication. So that's authentication I'm pushing on this F5 device using APM module. So we have APM module enabled on this F5 device. I just want to set authentication, right? So let's go to that APM device. This is my APM device. Okay, I have access through GUI, and I just want to set some authentication. So that authentication I would set up on the virtual server itself. So I have virtual server, and if you go on the virtual server, you would be able to see here access policy, access profile. This access profile is related to APM. If you have APM module, you would be able to see this access profile. There you can configure your authentication profile. So if your authentication profile is created, okay, authentication access profile is created, then you can call here under the virtual server resource. So for that, I need to create access profile, right? Where I would create, I would go to access this option, and there I would go policy profile, basically profile and policies. And here we have access profile. So we have two type of access profile. Access profile pre-session. Before creating the session, we can configure the access profile. Okay, so let's go to access profile pre-session policies. And this is the default one. If you want to use this one, you can use, else you can create a new one. I'm not getting option to create new one. So what I would do, I would create from here. Access profile. And if I click on this plus option, it would ask me to create access profile. So this profile, I would give the name test underscore AP access profile. Okay, profile type, this profile would be applicable for what? So I would say it would be applicable for LTM everywhere. So I would select all over here. Okay, rest of things I would keep as it is. And here language I would select that whenever user would be accessing, he would get the form in a English page. Let's finish this. So we have this test access profile. Now what I would do, I would go and edit this test access profile. To edit this, we have this option. We can click on edit, and it is going to show me VPM, Visual Policy Manager. This is called Visual Policy Manager, where you can create a policy and you can see that policy in a nice visual format. So for example, if user is start, okay, so this is start and deny. So in between, we can add whatever we just want to add. So when user start, first it should get login page. So how I can add login page? If I click on this plus option, I would have option. When user start, first it get logon page. So here I would add logon page. Add item. In logon page, user should be able to see username and password. And if you want to add any other field, user would be able to see other field as well. Okay. I don't want to change these variable as of now because this is our first class. As soon as we progress further, we would let you know that how you can customize all these variable. Okay. So as of now, use just this variable for logon page. In logon page, user would be able to see username and password. There, if you want to pre-populate any value, you can pre-populate. I would keep as it is, and I would save this. So when user would start, user would get logon page. After logon, what user would do? Username and password, it should match from somewhere. So I would select over here. It's authentication. Authentication I'm doing of user using a local database. So I would select local database for authentication. And in the local database, it would ask me to select the instance. I don't have any authentication instance. I would add that later. Just to save this. If user logon successful, user would be allowed. So from deny, I would select allow. If user is credential is getting failed, okay, so user is going to log out. Any locked user is going to be denied, and any failed user is also going to be denied. So this is the policy we have created using Visual Policy Manager. This policy we can save, and to save this policy, we have a nice option, apply access policy. If this is showing yellow, that means you have created policy, but you haven't applied it. So let's apply this policy. And as soon as you apply, this policy has been saved. This is saved, not applied on the virtual server. This is just saved. So this access policy we have created, this is saved. As I mentioned that in this access policy, we have selected the user database local, but in that database, we have nothing as of now. If you go to user local database, you can see that local database is nothing so far. So we need to create a user database. How we can create? In the same here, I would use a local database. And for that, what I need to do, I need to go to authentication. And in the authentication option under access policy, we have a local DB instance, this one. As of now, we have a user and instance option. So instance is nothing but that's a database name. As of now, we don't have any instance. If I click on instance, you can see we don't have any database. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new database. So I would say new, I would say this is local database, local underscore DB. This is local DB. Okay. And now I would click on OK. So now I have a database, and now I would create a user. So we have a database. In this database, I'm going to add a user. So if you go authentication, again, local database, click on user. And you would be able to see here, as of now, we don't have any user. So I'm going to create a new user. Okay. To create a new user, I should get the option over here, but I'm not getting. So what I would do, I would go to this access option, authentication, and then local DB and user, click on this plus option and give the username. So I would give the username, test user, and password, test at 123, test at 123. What would be the database for this user? This local DB. Let's create. So this test user has been created. And now what I would do, I have access policy. In this access policy, sorry, I have access profile. In this access profile, we have this test AP. Test AP I'm going to edit. And this time I'm going to change the database over here. Earlier we had none. Now I would select this policy, choosing the users from local database. Save this. And then apply this access policy. Now it has been applied, but this access policy is completely created. And now we need to call this access policy under the virtual server. So now let's go to virtual server. Here we have virtual servers. This is my virtual server. And if I go to that option, which is access policy, under access policy, we have access profile. We have created access profile under APM. That access profile we need to call over here. So let's call. So see here, when I'm trying to call that access profile, it is asking me that my virtual server must also include HTTP profile. So I would tell you some requirement. Whenever you are applying the access profile into your virtual server, you need to fulfill these two requirements. Number one, your virtual server type should be HTTPS. That is one thing. And number two, on virtual server, you need to configure HTTP profile. Client HTTP profile you need to configure. These are the two requirements you have to fulfill. As of now, my virtual server is what? It is HTTP. My virtual server is right now running on port number 80. So if this is HTTP, I cannot apply. And also, I'm not using HTTP profile. So first I need to make sure that my virtual server should be changed. So I would select none as of now, and I would change my virtual server type. Over here, it is using port number 80. I would use port number 443, HTTPS. So if I'm using HTTPS, that is a one requirement, and other requirement, HTTP profile should be enabled. So I'm going to enable HTTP profile over here. So if you are using HTTPS, you need to make sure that your SSL profile also be enabled. So I'm using a basic SSL profile, which is client SSL, which would be using self-signed certificate. And finally, I would call this access profile. And this time if I call, I won't get any error. I haven't get any error. And then let's update this. Now you can see you have a virtual server which is running on port number 443. This virtual server is using HTTP client profile. Okay. And it is using SSL profile. And finally, you can see it is using access profile over here. This access profile related to APM. This is the APM. So this access profile is going to do what? It is going to force the authentication. Force authentication. Where it is going to force the authentication? While accessing a virtual server. So if this is a client trying to hit the virtual server, before creating a session to the backend, let's say I have a pool. Before accessing backend pool, this is going to send the authentication page to the user. And when user is providing username and password, when it is going to supply, this username and password is going to authenticate on the APM itself. And once it is correct, the APM allow this user to access the backend pool, right? So let me show you whether this is happening in the same way or not. This is my client. Earlier, this client was able to access this 172.16.0.50. Now I'm closing that browser and try to re-access. This time I have to access using HTTPS protocol. HTTPS colon / then IP address of my virtual server 172.16.0.50. Press enter. Yeah, it is giving some certificate error, but we can proceed. Go to advanced, proceed. And what user is getting? User is getting login page. This logon page from where? F5 is providing this logon page. That means my APM is providing this logon page. User has to put right username and password, and then it should be able to see the resources, backend resources. So let me see if user is putting right username and password, which is test user and test at 123, the password. User would be able to access this. So what if user is trying to access same page next time? See, I have closed that and user is trying to access same page next time. HTTPS and the same page it is trying to access next time. This time it is not asking for authentication because session has been created. Okay. So let's go and use mode and try to access same page. Yeah, it is asking the username password. Test user test @123 and user is able to access it. So it doesn't matter if I add any other server, for other server as well, uh, you know, it would not ask for the authentication because it is doing authentication on virtual server level, not it is doing authentication on backend pool. Right? So you have seen what, as of now, you have seen that using APM, what we have done, we have authenticated the user before accessing the resources. So this was the one of the example where you have secured your resource web server resources. Okay. You can secure entire your network resources as well. So as of now, user is just trying to access one web server, but maybe user would try to access not web server, but is trying to access application. Okay, maybe you have application somewhere on the backend system and user want to access that notepad application. Okay, just a single application, notepad, wordpad, calculator, etc. Right? So you can secure that as well, single application. You can provide the access to the user to access entire network. Yeah, so with the APM you can control all these stuff. In today's class we just authenticated user for the website access. Do you have any question?
Oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. Nice. Go on.
I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, first question is with regard to the memory. If there is a lack of memory, how we can add the memory in the present appliance? So if you could show us that, that would be great. And secondly, with regard to the lab access, are we gonna get this lab access today? And license, we have to apply free license. Are you guys gonna give us any license?
You have to apply free licenses. So you would have your on lab access. So whoever is your coordinator, maybe Radhe or Myra. So she is going to provide you lab access. Regarding the memory, if you are short of memory on big IP devices, probably you do not have option to edit this lab, but we as an instructor we have, right? So you request to us and we would increase the memory over here. So right now I have taken 16 GB memory for this lab, okay, and that is enough for LTM and APM module. Yep.
Right, like I will have my own lab as well, so we can do it in Eve straight away when it is running, or we have to stop this image, then we can add the memory, so it won't affect the the whatever is the provisions
It
module.
depends that which version of you're using. If you are using community edition, so definitely you have to stop your device and then you need to add the memory. In our case, we are using licensed version and we can just increase the memory as of now without stopping this.
So it will increase. I myself have professional, so it will
Yeah,
increase straight away.
yeah.
There's no need to restart or these kind of stuff.
No, you don't need to restart. It is going to increase straight away.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And lab access is for lab access, you can coordinate to your coordinator. Yep.
Yeah, sure. Thank
That
you.
is the thing. For this particular, let me just introduce about what we are providing with this particular course. So with this particular course, we are providing you access to our lab, access to the workbook, access to the videos. Okay, so whatever class we are doing for those classes, you would get recorded videos. Okay, if you're stuck somewhere, you can refer to the videos, you can refer to the workbook, and you can perform your lab. Yeah. So overall, it is going to take 30 hours to complete this particular APM course. So 30 hours means 24 to 30 hours it is going to take. And per week, we have a 4-hour classes. So around 4 to 5 weeks, we would be able to complete this.
Right. With regard to course, if you don't mind, whether
Yeah.
it does cover the certification, the contents, and
Yeah.
also how much we are gonna touch with the the VPN, I mean capability of the APN
Yeah.
agent, VPN agent, deployments. So I'm more interested on that because my environment has that VPNs on it. So that's why I'm asking
We
that.
are going to completely cover the VPN environment, whether that is agent-based VPN or agentless VPN. Both we are going to cover, right? Yeah. So we are going to take here a kind of live scenario, how it is deployed on the industry level. All those stuff we are going to talk about here. And certification part, definitely it is going to cover certification as well.
So we can prepare this APM exam after the course. Am I
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. You can
All
prepare
right.
for that.
Great.
James, Michael,
Yeah,
any question? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I have one question. From my end, I'd like to know if you will cover some L and SSO and the Kerberos authentication and TLM and advanced troubleshooting. During the course, are you covering that?
Yeah. SSO we are going to cover here.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Oh,
Any
I have no question. For me, it's okay. Oh, sorry, guys. For me,
okay,
it's okay. All good. All good. All good.
great. Thanks, James. So
Thank you.
thanks
Thank you so
everyone. I'm
much.
just going to stop here and see you next week then with
Right. Have a
another
good
topic.
Sunday. Have a good rest. And thank you so much for your
Thanks.
classes today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye bye.
you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Good class
Nice
today.
class.
Omar,
class,
nice
man.
class,
Nice
very
class.
nice
Yeah,
class.
Yeah.
thank you.
See you
Thanks.
next
Thank
class.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good
Thank you.
weekend. Have a good Sunday. Bye bye.
You
Yes.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.